Hello, everybody. This is Johannes, your host, speaking. Um, it is currently at the top of the hour, and I'm about to get started here in just a second. I think I give it a few more seconds for people to trickle in. We currently have 22 participants, but rising, and so people probably have need a few seconds here to join in. I have put everybody on mute to keep the noises down. I will open this up for discussion in just a bit. Okie dokie. And I hope you can see me. I am Johannes Ernst. I'm reporting live from my backyard. I was just thinking, I have done a lot of public talks in my lifetime, but I have never reported directly from my backyard, and live air and microphones and wind, and I don't know how well this is going to work, but I will try. So the way this, I'm hoping that this is going to work is that I have a few slides that I'd like to show, but a very, very small number of them. And then I want to do a live walkthrough. Let me actually start here by sharing my screen again. So you saw the first hydroponic system in the backyard just on the screenshot here. I actually have two of them to show. One is the one that's here on the left, and one that is to the right, which is around the corner here, or the other side of my house. And here's some contact information if you want to get a hold of me. So the plan for today is I have one more slide, and that's it, and then live walkthrough, and then we can spend as much time as you like on that. We have a total of 1 hour for the session. And then I want to talk a bit about the open source part. There's some Git involved on the website and all of that, which is, I think, a little unusual for a project that's not software and not electronics, or at least mostly not. And we can have as much open discussion and Q&A as you like. Given that this is online, if you want to chat more or about one particular detail, I'd be happy to stay online after our allotted time is over and chat some more. So here's one more slide that I wanted to show, which is the history and the status of the system. So you have some idea where I come from and why I did this and all of that. There's a bunch of people who seem to be making some noises and aren't on mute. I would ask you to put yourself on mute. That way that whoever wants to speak up can actually speak up, and I don't have to have everybody on mute and can't hear what you guys want to say. So in terms of history, so a year ago it was, in May last year, I went to the Maker Faire Bay area here, and I came across a display by a guy called Bruce Gee, who showed this thing, which is shown here in the system that he has in his, one of the many systems he has in his backyard, which is a very similar system to what I'm showing today, because I copied it from him. I looked at it and said, like, you know, how hard can this be? This is really cool. My context why I was interested in that one is because I'm looking at the world and how it is going, and I'm thinking, you know what, one of these days stuff is going to come down, and we don't know anything. I don't know anything about how to grow food, even the basics of it. And so I might as well learn something about growing food by doing it in my backyard. I live in Silicon Valley, where land is at a premium, which means I can't just simply take my backyard and grow all sorts of things. So I need to have something that's rather compact. And so I basically copied his system, and that was easy because he documented it online, and that goes to the open source part at that website that I have right here. And then a couple months later, the first one is live, which is the one that's right behind me. You saw perhaps earlier. It's a 5x5 first system. Its pump goes off the mains at 120 volts, and it is dumb because it contains no smarts like electronics or software whatsoever. But it has been producing wonderful veggies ever since about that time. Then in the fall, I started documenting this the way like one would do in an open source project, and we can spend more time on that later. And then finally, early this year, the coronavirus strikes, and I'm thinking, you know what? It's just a matter of time till we go to the store, and the things that we'd like to buy there aren't actually there. And who knows where the veggies come from and how many viruses they have on it. What about I just expand the system? And so I added another system, which is more or less similar with some improvements, which is twice as big. And this one works off 12 volts, and it is solar off-grid with a little bit of electronics, but not much yet. Hopefully, there will be more over time. And here I am, and I'm growing mostly lettuce, peppers, tomatoes, leeks, beans, peas, kohlrabi, herbs, all sorts of stuff. And that's the end of my slides, really. And I want to show you in live here. Okay, let's see. Okay, so what you see behind me is my original system here. Let me sort of try to walk you through here slowly. I don't have I'm not entirely sure what the best way is of doing the video part here, but I am just going to try and sort of zoom around and then point out stuff. Ignore the thing that's at the top here for a second. That's the solar panel that is actually not part of the system for all sorts of reasons. It ended up there, but the system here really ends right here at the top of the screen. And so let me point out what we've got here. So here at the bottom, I have a big bucket from the Home Depot.
We'll see how long it is. I don't know how long it's going to take. He's just started talking.
Everybody who's not speaking, could you please put yourself on mute? Thank you. So here is a reservoir that has water in it, and there's a little pump in it. And actually, I can really easily pull out the pump from there to show you, but it's a pump just like this one. They sell it for fountains and decorative stuff. It is an underwater pump. You just put it in there. It uses the usual PVC pipes you get at the hardware store. It pumps water up here. I recently put a little filter in here. You might not see it behind this lettuce. That pumps the water up there. Zoom back up. Change this here. Up here, where it inserts the water into this pipe. This is the first growing pipe. The water slowly goes through that pipe to the other side and leaves the pipe through here, and it goes into the next pipe on the other side of the system, where it goes back. And so the whole water goes zigzag down, runs by through all of these pipes until it ends up back in the reservoir. The plants then just simply sit like this little tomato plant here. They sit in these little cups here, baskets, and you can see hydroponic plants are famous for long roots. This is a pretty small plant, so it has only small roots, but the roots can get so big that I'm sometimes wishing I would have chosen thicker pipes like these ones, because they can actually get clogged. If you take this lettuce right here, it's already much larger roots, and they can tend to get really big. So how do things get in here? Well, it starts with some seeds that I bought here from Johnny's, which is an online seed distributor. But I have put all sorts of seeds in from all sorts of places. Most of them work just fine, so it didn't make much difference for me what it is. These seeds go into these little cubes here. They have holes in there, one seed or two seeds per hole. And then you put them into a germination tray. Let me move the camera here over there. Here is my germination tray that I pulled out. Here you see an example for one of them. This is mostly, I think, cucumbers. So you can see some of them have sprouted, some of them have not sprouted yet. In case you're wondering what's this white thing that is sitting in it, that is a 3D printed holder. These things are supposed to be, used as a big field, not even 3x3, but a big part in essentially filling up this entire germination tray. But then I'm a small-scale grower, so I'm not doing this professionally. So I have only much smaller lot sizes and different seeds, and so I break it up, and they're germinated at different times. And I got completely confused which seed is which, and which ones germinated and which didn't, and how long did it take, and all of that stuff. And so I decided that I was going to 3D print these little holders here. So they are labeled with here B and here is the one with D, so that I know which is which and keep track of it. Keeping track of stuff actually turned out to be a lot more work than I would have expected. And once the seed is sprouted enough, like this one, it goes into this little basket like this, and it can go into the system. Now you may have heard there's different kinds of, I don't know what kind of experience levels you guys have. There might be some people on this call that know much more about this than I ever will. It's very possible, but there's all sorts of different kinds of hydroponic growing systems. This one is a very simple one. It just runs the water by all of the plants. The plants are immersed all of the time, or at least the roots are immersed all the time. And the reason why I picked it is because it was a design that was very easy to copy because I knew nothing about it, and it is very compact because it is vertical. And so this particular system behind me has room for about 70 plants, and the footprint is about 5 by 5 feet, and it goes 8 feet up. It is very messy. If you look at it and you're like, why did this guy, he has lots of holes in here, and why does he have this jungle of tomatoes over here and then very little in the middle? That's because I am in the process of tearing or emptying the system, putting it onto the new system so I can clean it out properly. It just happens to be the tail end of that process, and I haven't had the heart yet to kill off this tomato plant, there's a couple of tomato plants because there are still such very nice tomatoes in here. Let's grab one right here. So I have to say that in my family, people would not usually go after the veggies from the grocery store. They go after these veggies. In fact, the lettuce is good enough you can eat it without dressing. I've never heard of lettuce that one would eat without dressing, but we have definitely done that because it is just so good. So in terms of benefits here, our veggie quality has gone way up for the things that we grow. There's nothing like that you can buy in the store, and certainly you can have many more varieties than you could possibly find in the regular store for things. So what I'm going to try now is I'm going to switch to my cell phone because for logistical reasons, and I'm going to see and try whether I can show you the other system around the curve. Hang on. So I hope you can see me and hear me with this particular phone now. And so I'm going to go around the curve here, where there is my other system. Actually, this is not working the way it is supposed to. Why am I not seeing the correct video here? Mute all. Stop video. And somebody tell me whether you can actually see the video that you're supposed to be seeing here, moving around. Okay, thank you.
Yes, we see it.
So I walk around here and going over to this other part of the system. And what you see here is, as I said, it's about twice as large. It's the same basic system. There's some differences in what I learned from how I best make it work. In particular, I made some of these growing pipes here doubles because I wanted to have more room up here for taller plants like these peas here that I have there. These are peas. Let me walk here quickly and show you what kind of plants I have. And they're a little random. I'm still trying to figure out what the best sequence is and how to where to put them best. But here, these are peas, snap peas, I think. They are maybe 2 weeks old or something like that since it's been in here. And there seem to be some flowers all the way to the top. I still have to figure out how to actually get them. Here I have a peddler plant that apparently wasn't very happy for some time, but now it seems to be happy again. It has some flowers in here. Here we have some more beans. These I think are fava beans. Look rather impressive as plants. I knew nothing about it before planting them, randomly picking them off the catalog. I have some more peppers here, some more beans, some parsley and some cilantro. So here's some more lettuce in various stages of growth. I'm trying to stagger things so I have a constant supply of, or an ongoing supply of lettuce. Here you can see that you have these lids for the openings where the plants go that I'm not currently using. As I said, this is a new system that has only been online for a couple of weeks, or more like 4 weeks. But I'm trying to stagger things so not everything is full yet. And there's a lot of algae that happen. So it is a good idea to close that so there isn't a whole lot of air that goes in, sunlight that goes into the pipes. And did I mention 3D printing? I think the connection between hydroponics and 3D printing is perfect. It is so much simpler to come up with a little thing like this and print it like 20 or 50 or whatever times than anything I could think of doing at the garage with a saw and a chisel and whatever. Let's see what else we got here. We have a bunch of kohlrabi down here, and these are mostly lettuces. We eat a lot of lettuces. Here is some chives in the middle. Let me go to the other side. Oh yes, here there have some cucumbers right here. Oh, you can see there's the first cucumber actually that seems to be growing right here. And then some more tomato plants. All sorts of lettuce, right? You would not get that in a store, at least not a store that I tend to go to. Here I have some chives. Here are, actually this is a bit of one. Here is a nice kohlrabi. Not so many people in this country like kohlrabi or know about kohlrabi. And it works basically the same way with the rising pipe here. It inserts water there. It runs, I don't know whether you can hear that, but if you can hear it, there's a little funny noise in the back. That's my pump. This is a 12-volt pump. I think I said this earlier. And it runs on a timer. So I'm still playing around with how often it runs and for how long it runs. But currently it runs like every a minute and a half or every 2 minutes for a few seconds. And it basically dumps a bunch of water in here and then it sort of slowly trickles down. It comes down here in this last pipe and it goes into this particular reservoir. So down here, you see the water flow. It sort of averages out at the bottom. You can see that I have some other, so here's the pump and so forth. And you can see that I have some other plants, but these plants currently are incomplete. Here is a little sensor that I got off Alibaba or someplace like that, that I'm planning to use for water level measurements, because the thing that happens is when it's warm, these plants consume an incredible amount of water real quick. And as soon as there's no water, the plants die. So it is really important that you want to have enough water all the time. And so I tend to forget, you get busy and something happens. And so I want to have notification functionality when there's not enough water in the tank. And so finally, this is all a little provisional. Here's my electronics box. And this looks a lot more complicated than it should be, but it is. So what I ended up doing is, and let me go back to the old system. That's the old system from the other side. There is the solar panel up here, which was basically the cheapest solar panel I could find on Amazon. And then down here is a little box that contains a battery. So this is now an off-grid system, which is nice because if power goes down for whatever reason, my plants don't die. And there is in here in my electronics cabinet, there's a little charge controller. And then there is a little ESP32 for the electronics people among you that currently doesn't do anything other than run this timer for the pump on off on some schedule. There's also a Raspberry Pi in here, mostly because I do not want to do software updates over the air for this thing and break it. And then the system doesn't work and the pump doesn't work and all the plants die. This is like a a production critical, mission critical system, all the plants die. Several months of growth might be gone if something is wrong with my electronics. So I know how to update things over the air with a Raspberry Pi. I don't know the ESP32 very well, and I will screw it up. So I put this Raspberry Pi in there as well. And there's a few other boards which are mostly making it easier for me to do some sensing that I'm not really doing yet. Like I want to track, here's the levels. This is supposed to be connected to the level sensor over there. And various other things. So there's more work to be done. And I put it in this box so it can rain on it. Okie dokie. And I think this is basically the overview of the system. And I'm going to come back and switch back to my other system here. And we can have a conversation or if any questions that you might want to have at this time before we go on. Is that a good idea? There is some in the chat. Okay. Do I grow tomatoes in the winter? I do not know whether I grow tomatoes in the winter because I just started growing them. These are this year's. So not much happened during the winter. So I live in Northern California. It doesn't get terribly cold, but all the plants sort of stopped doing very much. They didn't exactly die, but it didn't exactly grow either. I'm still learning. I'm new to this one. I'm presenting work in progress. I have no particular expertise other than what I've basically tried out myself. How did I get information on how to do the electronics related system? Theoretically, I learned that in school. So, but it was a long time ago, and I forgot about most of it. So, my professors would be unhappy if I didn't remember enough to do this. But the point about the electronics here in the chat is that there's a lot of interesting knowledge that's required to successfully grow plants. And I have learned a lot about and a lot of newfound respect for people who grow food. This is not, as certain politicians recently said, a very brain dead kind of job. One actually can learn a lot of stuff here that I didn't know. To build this one, you essentially have to know something about a bit of woodworking, not very complicated, but it is some woodworking involved. You need to handle a saw, and you need to handle a drill, that kind of stuff, know how to measure and make things level. You certainly need to know something about the basics of how plants behave, and the thing that I most was surprised about is pests, because a very great plants here, and I'm not the only one who thinks they're great. So there's all these little critters that show up and want something, and you look at this and say, what do I do? What do I do? I'm gonna kill them all. And then you realize, wait, do I want to put all this poison on these plants? No, I don't want to put this poison on it. What can I actually do? And you realize that what industrial agriculture does is very clearly not something you would do with your own food. At least I wouldn't do that with my own food. And so, as it turns out, just this morning, as I'm getting ready for the setup here, and I don't know whether you can see this or not. This plant right here, it was in the other system. I am looking around, and there's this little butterfly coming around, and the butterfly is flying around, and I'm thinking, what is it up to? And it finally decided that it was going to stop here for, I believe, about something in the order of 1 or 2 seconds. And let's see which one is the right leaf. But it left some. Yeah, we may not be able to see it anyway on the camera here, but it left a teensy sort of like spray-like set of eggs or whatever they are exactly for the butterflies on my leaves. And I know that this is what happens because this is like I think this is a broccoli, but in that family, the butterflies and the caterpillars, they love this. I have been fighting all last year with them that they were going to eat my kohlrabi instead of me. So you see that there's an ecosystem here, and on some level, you read about all the insects dying, and you think like, oh yeah, do I really want to? I mean, there's a trade-off here. Do I give some of these butterflies, of which there are very few in my neighborhood, my plant, or should I eat it myself? And I think there's a little microcosm here, in terms of the larger problems that we have in society with food production and so many other things. But back to the electronics and other kinds of things, you learn from other people. And ideally, what I'd like to get to is actually not become an expert at hydroponics or anything like this, or electronics for that matter, or an expert at any of this. I would like it if I could go somewhere where it has been pre-chewed for me so I can just follow instructions and be successful. You know, if I buy a car, I don't need to know how the car works, but I can be successful driving from point A to point B. It would be nice if I could produce food in my backyard without understanding how exactly it works. And one of the reasons why I started thinking about this from an open source perspective is, what if we managed to collaborate, whoever is interested in doing this one, putting instructions for all aspects of the system online and improving it, just like in an open source development project, to the point where both the construction and the operation of all aspects of the system can be so foolproof that anybody can do it. I think this would be beautiful. Imagine everybody had the same fresh veggies in their backyard and did not have to be an expert and wouldn't have to worry about it because it is all, you know, pre-chewed. It is in a way like it is almost a consumer product. That is really my the context here. So this is it's an experiment in the sense that I'm not aware of anybody who has really done anything meaningful that's open source style project other than in the software and in the electronics hardware world. There may be others, but it would be nice if you could do that for these kinds of things, which has some nice side effects like good food. Where are we storing the most of the software and data for the system? So the software right now is minimal. It's all sitting on GitLab, and we can get there in a minute. The data for the system, there isn't really any data that's meaningful. If there were, it would currently just sit on my ESP32 or my Raspberry Pi. For analysis, I don't have any of this set up yet. Personally, I'm an advocate of keeping our data home as opposed to handing it over to some cloud overlord in the sky, and so I would put it on my home server. The name of the hydroponic system that you're using, so it's a derivative. It's not the same thing anymore. I will put it. I will put it in the chat at the end. I don't want to type right now. Actually, you know what? It's in the about section of the projectspringtime.org site. There's a link there. Okie dokie. Now, what I would like to do is let's talk about the open source part of this. And so what I want to do is go back to screen share, and this time go back to my browser. If this thing lets me do that. Hang on 1 second. Here we are, Firefox. Okay. So you have probably gone to the website already while I was talking, and let me try to explain how this is working here. This website is, for those of you who know something about open source development, is sort of straight out of Git. And which means that anybody can submit changes to it. And what I'm trying to do is document all aspects of the system. Let me try to explain this. So up here, I have systems. Currently, there's only one system, which is the one that's behind me. That's the original system. I was hoping to get the documentation for the second system, the larger one, online today, but I failed to do that in time. But it will probably happen within the next week or so. So within that system, so what I'm trying to do here is, other than provide a status of the page, I'm trying to say, okay, here's what it looks like. Here's an overview, and then different parts of things that are necessary in order to build it and operate it. For example, a bill of materials. Let's look, what is the bill of materials here? Oh, the bill of materials has, you know, a vertical frame. It has 16 arms. It has some growing pipes and some source where it comes from. Now, I'm not a mechanical engineer, so there's probably better ways of doing that, but that's the best I could think of. And you look at this and say, okay, what is this? Let's see. Let's look at this arm. What is this arm here? And arm 1, when you click on it, is you can also find it through the parts. Is a description of this arm. Here's some pictures for it, and here's a drawing for the arm. And then here's the tools for how to make it. So the material is plywood, stained, and here's some tools for how to build it, and here's some construction advice. So the idea here is that even if somebody doesn't know very much about how to do these things, right now the assumption is that you know how to read a technical drawing like this one, and you can translate that into some practical activities for to actually make it following the instructions. You can do this. So, by the way, I should mention it is incredibly difficult, I found, to put a little drawing like this one online. You would sort of think you should find some open source CAD tool and you draw this thing and you have this thing online in like an hour or something. That did not turn out to be the case. It was, I spent way too much time investigating pretty much every open source CAD tool I could find. And eventually I decided, screw this all. And so what I actually decided to do here instead is build this little thing here, which is a side project called Drafting.js, which lets you publish simple blueprints, including the one I just showed, with a bunch of JavaScript. That was a side project. I didn't intend to set that out, but it turned out to be easier to write that library than to get some open source CAD tool to produce something. To produce something that I could actually put online. So this is just a few JavaScript statements, and it renders this appropriately, which makes it also easy from a improvement open source style kind of things. If somebody figures out that it would be a better plan, you know, instead of having this to be 2.5 inches here from the right corner, but it would be something else, then it becomes a very straightforward diff to what is there before. That can be easily merged and can be easily reviewed. So rather than the blob file that comes with the CAD tool. And so let me go back to my system. So here's my bill of materials. Here's the blueprints for the basic system. You can see how the arms and the post here are assembled. Of course, there's no need that the measurements have to be exactly the same, so I'm just documenting what I did, what sort of worked for me. And then instruction sections, and then let me go to the systems model. I was also attempting to document how this actually works. How does the system actually produce plants? And I just came up with this thing. I call it a process model, which is a little bit overstated in the case. But it's trying to say, what's the inputs, what's the outputs, what's the environment that's required, and then what do you do on a daily basis? And this is not complete, but this is sort of the kind of thing that I want to present to people who don't want to become experts on this one, because the questions that I'm getting about the system are sort of similar from people. Like, you know, what do you actually need here? For example, this nutrients here should really have a link, which it doesn't have yet. So I could say, so we could click at, you know, what is the nutrients that are put in there? By the way, I forgot to mention this. Let me actually quickly show this one. So the nutrients that go in here are, I buy as these salt-like substances. They come in different kinds of combinations, 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts. I'm currently at the 3-part thing. So basically what you do is you measure them according to the instructions, and you dissolve them in the water, and that's the nutrients. You do have to monitor on an ongoing basis how much of the nutrients your plants have taken out. It all depends on the weather and what plants you have and the growing phase and all sorts of things. So one of the things you want to do on an ongoing basis is measure the pH of your water. And somebody is not on mute and is doing all sorts of things in the background. Could whoever is not on mute put themselves on mute, please? Thank you. And then the other thing is essentially a measure of electrical conductivity, which gives you some idea of how much of that of those nutrients you actually have in the water. And I've not found that my plants are pretty tolerant if I'm not exactly staying within the ranges here. Somebody else is also not on mute. Can you please put yourself on mute if you are not speaking? Thank you. Okay, okay.
Are you on mute?
What?
Are you on mute?
Yes. Is he trying to talk to you?
Okay, somebody just said they're on mute, but we could hear you, so probably not. Okay, happens. So going back to Git, so what I'd like to invite people is to, number one, think about whether you like fresh veggies, like these ones. Here's some pictures of the things that I grew. Basil was growing so fast that it actually clogged my plants. It produced a lot of pesto, which was excellent. So whether you like plants like this, whether you have 5x5 or something like that feet in your back area or somewhere where it is sunny, the system itself isn't very expensive. It turns out the most expensive part is actually actually, you know what? I just realized I'm not sharing my screen the way I thought I was. Hang on, that's not a good plan. All right, just one again. Here we are. Here's my basil that was so impressive. But so as you need about this 5x5 or 4x4 footprint. It costs probably a few $100s. The biggest expenses might be tools you might not have, like a hole cutter and the right sizes for those baskets. And maybe the pH meter is relatively expensive, but it is not terribly expensive. Of course, if you compare the amount of produce you produce with what it costs you at the grocery store, you're probably making a loss because there's no economies of scale, and you can write off your various equipment over thousands and thousands of plants. On the other hand, I'm not doing that in order to beat the grocery store on price. My goals are to be more independent and have better quality food, and particularly learn something about how food is grown. And then if you try to build something like that, so resubmit your changes, because you will make changes. It will be different. Say, it worked better for me this way, and we can do it as open source style as we like. If we go back to GitLab here, this is the stuff that's currently there. If you don't know GitLab, it's basically the same thing as GitHub, just a different company. This is the website. There's a bunch of files in here. For example, if you're looking for the description of a particular part, then let's say here's the arm. We looked at it earlier. Actually, hang on, this is wrong. This is not here. The arm is right here. Here's just some text that describes how it works. This is done in a static site generator called Hugo, which is particularly simple because I don't have to run a website myself. GitLab will do it for me. Very easy to edit. And then if you have different drawings, the drawings, for example, here is just here's the JavaScript that showed this particular arm. If you have an improvement, add it to it. And then I should mention, which I didn't earlier. Let me go back to this one.
This guy's got the most participants I've seen.
There is a ton. There's a ton of.
This guy's one is.
Okay, somebody's not on mute again. Could you please put yourself on mute? Thank you. Somebody with small children in the background, it seems to me. I want to show about the 3D parts here. For example, the flange here, which is these two particular parts that are deep in there somewhere. I didn't show them. Which I'm 3D printing, and here are the OpenSCAD files that I'm using to print this. So it's also not very complicated. Obviously, we could use different tools, but it's the one that I'm using. You don't necessarily need a 3D printer for doing this. It just turned out that for me, it was just very convenient to have one. Because whenever I thought of, oh, that would be much better if I had this little piece, let's try out that, then I would have it around and just try it out. For example, let me show you this one here. This is a little thing that actually has 3 parts. You might have seen it in System 2 over there. So I'm taking this basket. There's a plant in it, in production, and I'm putting these two parts here on top in a way that it covers it. The reason for that is that less light goes in, so they have less algae, and also because it helps the plant, a young plant, to stand up better because it doesn't fall all over. And over some trial and error, I don't know how well you see this little light here, I opened it up so that I can also label my pots, my baskets here. The reason I want to label them is because I'm no good at remembering which plant this was and which variety of cucumber. So I'm trying to write it down, which these things are, and trying to come up with a scheme by which I can actually track this. It is not, I'm still working on that one. And then I put this little thing on top here, which is another sort of stage on top, which can hold the plant up a little higher. Now this is all pretty basic, and it doesn't actually work terribly well. How do I hold this so you can actually see this? But it is sort of trial and error, and there's a lot of useful trial and error one can do. And I hope I get some help that other people do some trial and error, and we can collectively improve this. And I think that is basically the things that I wanted to show. So I think what would be useful, let me go through a few of the questions in the chat, and then I can just open it up for discussion, and we can talk about what you like to talk about. Did you find any plants that work better than others in your system? Yes, absolutely. Some things don't work at all, or they'll work for a little while, but I'm still in the experimenting phase. If you look behind me, there's these little thingies here, which I'm sure are not going to work. This happened to be some garlic that I found in the kitchen that had sprouted, and I just put it in there to see what happens. My thesis is that it will actually not work because it will foul or degenerate somehow, but so far they're doing okay. We'll see. My cauliflower was very funny. Cauliflower got very nice plants, very big leaves, grew very nicely, but it never developed anything resembling a cauliflower. So I do not know why that is. Again, I'm not an expert. I believe it might have to do with the wrong temperature, and it may just be that the cauliflower does not produce its bud or its head in a hydroponic context. I don't know. And let's see what I've got here. Yes, and then there is the plants that it can probably grow along my lettuce to repel insects. I am absolutely certain that there's a ton of stuff like that that one could do. Now, what I'd like to, though, is instead of doing this all by myself and trying this out, which produces a lot of work, whose benefits can be written off by one person, I'd much rather work with other people who have, a similar system, and we can learn from each other. I think it would be so cool if somebody said, if you put plant X right next to lettuce Y, then I have experienced 50% less, caterpillars, while some other bugs may not have had any impact, and we can learn from each other. I think a bunch of stuff from traditional solventless agriculture probably applies here, but it is unclear to me what exactly does and what doesn't, because plants communicate with each other in strange ways, including underground, and I do not know that they do this in a hydroponic system. I think that's the questions I see in the chat. What's the water level in my pipes, and does it change over time? This is my water level in pipes is about half in the pipes, but this is not a precision work of construction. So so actually the way it works, I should say, these pipes that drain it here, they stick through the pipe here, and they're supposed to be about halfway through the pipe, but not all of them are. So some of the pipes have more water in them and some have less. I have not really noticed a difference in the way the plants act. They might, but I just haven't noticed that. It doesn't change over time, because as soon as there's more water coming on one side, it drains on the other side. Maybe actually what I should do is show you how it drains. Let's see that here? No, Well, maybe you can see it at the very bottom here. My cord isn't quite long enough. I can try to find use the cell phone if you want to see, but it's just this, the pipe sticking up with an open end. One thing I did though is because the pipe sticks up and there's a lot of roots. One of the 3D printing things I did is this, to put it on top of the pipe to keep the roots out, because it actually clogs the pipe sometimes. That was a moderately successful experiment, which is why I don't have that in there right now. So lots of experiments. The good source for the baskets, yes. I originally ordered the exact same thing that Bruce had been doing in his system from last year, because I decided that I was going to just copy what worked for somebody else, and only once I got this to work, then I was going to try to make changes of my own. These ones are just off Amazon. They are pretty sturdy. I don't remember what they cost me, but they are almost infinitely reusable. So it's not really an expense. Yes, so I think some of the websites and suppliers links are on the site, but it is not complete yet, and I have been also changing them over time. What I really should be doing is put all of the links to supplies there, and then have a pro and con, what worked and what didn't. And so, for example, I like these baskets much better than the ones I originally had, because they have a little rim, and on that rim I can write. And when I stack them on top of each other, when in storage, it doesn't scrape off the label, which you would think is a totally minor thing, but turned out to be important practice, because nothing more frustrating than if you're spending all this time trying to catalog which plant is which, and then you can't read your permanent marker because it gets scraped off. One of the biggest challenges right now is there a specific area that would benefit from more folks experimenting. So I'm learning new challenges all the time. It turns out the other day, I'm noticing what is going on here. I have a ton of algae in some places in the new system. For one, because I didn't put my lids on there early enough. And I'm noticing there is little, it looked like space aliens had landed. There's little round circles in the algae, where the algae is not as full, or is not as dark as it should be on the walls of the pipe. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? So I'm looking very closely, and I'm finding that there's a teensy little worm, maybe about 2 millimeters long or something like that. Right, basically a tenth of an inch, that apparently has attached itself to the pipe on one end, and is sort of circling around on the other end, and it's eating the algae. So it's good that it eats the algae, but what do I know about this worm? What is this thing? Will it destroy my plants? So what can I do about it?
Thanks.
Is what? Somebody said something. But so I don't know. And there's a lot of things like that where, so there's a Reddit group called R Hydroponics. Actually, there's several Reddit groups on hydroponics. I posted there, nobody said anything. I put it on my little microscope and said, who is this guy? What should I do about him? But nobody knows. How do you get rid of him? I don't know. So far, I believe that some of the smaller plants in my system have died more than they should have, but not many, so I don't care very much. I think that's the consequence of this worm, but I don't know. Is there a mechanism for having worms like this in it that eat the algae, which would be nice, without getting in the way of the plants? I don't know either. So there's lots of operational things. So I think, back to the question of the biggest challenges, I think it would be very, very useful if other people were operating similar systems, and we could learn from each other on the operational growing challenges as they come on. Certainly, it would also be useful on the electronic side if I had a bit more code here than what's in there. I would like to run the because now I'm off grid, so I have to conserve power. So I want to run the pump less at night. I want to run the pump less when the sun isn't shining, or in the winter, or when it's cold, and things like that. Somebody needs to write some code and figure out how to get the hardware correct so it can actually reliably measure these things and all of that. It is all not terribly complicated, but it's all a lot of work. Let's see what else we got here. I think that's the questions in the chat. Speak up if you like. I don't think people are muted. You don't necessarily have to chat, just speak up. Anybody? Well, if not, then I actually have a slide on the help needed. So here's the questions that I can think of that would be useful. Some of them are basically covered. I think the core question is, how do we grow even more, even better veggies even faster? For example, I do get a bunch of yellow leaves. I don't know, is that normal? Can I avoid that? I don't know. It would be nice to reduce the cost of the bill of materials. By and large, it is pretty cheap. The basic frame is just 2x4s with a bunch of screws in it. So that's really cheap. Some plywood. What isn't cheap is the pipes, which is about, at least here locally, it's about $20 per 10-foot pipe. So for the small system, that's 2 of the pipes. You cut them in half. Interesting enough, that the lids, the covers, sorry, not the lids, the covers at the end of the pipes is the most expensive part in the entire system, for reasons that I cannot comprehend. But it will be nice to come up with better sourcing for some of these parts. And then there's of course a lot of smarts one can add. See what else we got here. Chat, here we are. When do I add nutrients in the wall? Yes, and best word to start it. So when do I start nutrients? Basically, over time, I felt I got a bit of a feel for how long it takes until the system has depleted either water or nutrients. Simply because you do it often enough to realize how long that takes. And so, but basically, what you do is you measure it with a meter, which I didn't bring here. It's inside. There's a bunch of meters that are being sold specifically for hydroponic growers. That's a relatively large expense. I think mine cost almost $200, but it was probably worth it because if you have an inaccurate meter, I actually had 2 other cheap pH meters before that, and I realized that when I had the more expensive meter and the cheap ones, all 3 produced very different readings on the same liquid. So I will just choose to believe that the expensive meter is more accurate. Which may or may not be true, but so that was worth it. And so you with that meter, you measure your essentially electrical conductivity, and you basically add enough nutrients until you're within the range that you should. That doesn't seem to be a practical way for people like us without spending a lot of expense figuring out which of the nutrients have to be added. So it's sort of an all or nothing kind of thing, just an aggregate value, but that seems to have worked just fine. So in the wall, practically add nutrients mostly when I add water, which is can be a week or 2 in the winter time, and it can be every couple of days in the summertime. Recording be available. I'm assuming this recording works here. I'm going to put this onto the website within a couple of days of today. And there's also sign up for a mailing list, which currently has basically no members. But if you'd like to stay in touch, that should be the easiest thing to do. Just sign up for the mailing list, and we can stay in touch with each other. Which variety of lettuce was so good you can eat without dressing? Actually, if you ask me, I would say all of them. And I have about 6 different ones or something so far. Let's see. Best way to get started? Well, I think you gotta find a spot and where to put it, and just you know, reserve, you find the parts, order them, and it takes you, if you're fast, it takes you about a weekend to build this. Fast as a you know, handyman. If they're not so fast, it might take you longer. Not counting like times for maybe staining the wood, because it does rain on this. So stain the wood is probably a good idea. And the point about the nematodes, yes, I looked it up exactly. That seems to be some variety of nematode. That doesn't help me terribly though in trying to figure out what to do about them. And so far, I've decided that there was no practical way I could think of getting them out of a system that has plants in it, because even if I were to flush the system and take the plants out, if I put them back in, chances are they or their larvae or eggs or whatever they have are probably going to get back into the new system or the cleaned out system, which is also, I think, the way I got it from the old system into the new system. So I'm just going to leave them. However, as soon as I decide to actually kill off these tomato plants behind me here and clean out that system, I'm going to clean out the pipes well, maybe use some bleach or something in order to hopefully not have them again. You know, it might turn out that the system works better with nematodes as opposed to without. I don't know. Any other questions? So I should mention that this is just my system, right? There's many other kinds of systems for if you want to start growing something hydroponically with less effort and less scale, because this have 70 plants and the other one is about 150 plants or room for that. There are a bunch of methods that require just a single pot. In the simplest case, you basically put your plant into the pot, you close it up with some water inside, and as the plant grows, it drinks the water, and there have been many people who have produced great results with that kind of method, so you can do it one pot at a time. There is other variations, the most intriguing of which is what's often called aquaponics, where in addition to the plants, you have fish in the reservoir, and the fish will hopefully eat the algae, so you're getting rid of the algae problems. Maybe they would also eat my nematodes, who knows? And in addition to the veggies, you would also have some fresh fish, which sounds very intriguing, and I might do that one day, but not anytime soon, because I figure there is many more things that can go wrong in a system that also has fish in it than a system that just has plants in it. And I'm happy so far just to get this thing running productively. Anything else? So I have seen a few signups to the mailing list, which is excellent. Speak up. There is very little traffic / no traffic on it, and tell your friends. You know, on a forward-looking basis here, I'm thinking, you know, I don't know what the future brings, but we already have not the meat in our grocery stores that we thought we were going to have during this pandemic, and some other aisles also look rather empty when I go to the local store here, and I don't know what global warming will bring and all of that. But I think by and large, it's not a bad idea to, at least on a small scale, figure out how food could be produced locally. Even if we never do, even if we never produce more than 2% of our own consumption, who knows where this is going. Personally, I'm getting very queasy when I'm sitting and I'm relying on some remote service, whether it's the grocery store and its supply chain or anything else. And all of a sudden goes away because I'm feeling rather helpless, and I don't like feeling helpless. So I like to at least understand how this works. And so I don't know about you, but if so, there is, I think, this is a great hobby. It tastes good. It's moderately expensive as hobbies go. You know, cheaper than taking the family to Disneyland. And it produces things and good things and fun over some period of time. And you know, people asked about what knowledge one has to have. You might learn something about electronics or about woodworking or about all sorts of things that you might not have thought about. And because there's some templates to work from, I think it is a relatively safe place where to start, as opposed to some project where you get stuck. I don't see a reason why anybody would really get stuck with this kind of project. And I think we are at the top of the hour. Thank you all for coming. I think we had somewhere 30, 40, I don't know what the maximum was, people on the call, which is a great turnout. This is only the first time I did a presentation from my backyard. I did try to do a presentation on this at an open source conference a few months ago, which was the most disastrous presentation ever because all the display equipment went down on me and trying to show pictures, and I had no way of showing pictures. So this went much better. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
right, and so I will hang out for a little while longer here if anybody wants to talk, like people do after presentations usually. If you all drop off, then I will at some point quit the Zoom call. But speak up if you'd like to talk.
I missed a little bit of the starting the presentation, and is there any way you can what your system looks like, and how much sun does your area get currently?
Let me start at the back. How much sun does it get? You can see right now it's in the shade already. I live in Silicon Valley, so we're getting a lot of sun around the year. I have not noticed that sun is really a factor in anything. Temperature, I think, is, but it is not sun. If you were, in Canada or north of the Arctic Circle, I believe there's people growing stuff, but I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know about that. It is possible that you affect. So my experience is that your growing season is limited more by the temperature than it is by the sunshine. But again, that is an amateurish assessment. I tried in the winter, which is why up there is this non-stained frame up there. In the winter, I tried to hang some plastic sheets down to basically avoid the plants dying when it's getting close to freezing. Which I managed to do, but it didn't grow either. It was a very bad contraption though with the plastic sheets, so I'm gonna take this back down. I think if I wanted to really grow something in the winter, I would have to come up with something that is more sealed than what I had. But I'm actually would really do next time around if I want to grow something in the winter, and I hope my new system helps me do that a little, is to put it against a wall. Fascinating tidbit, the history of greenhouses did not involve glass. The history of greenhouses was walls that got heated up by the sun, and it would radiate warmth at night long before they put any glass there. And I figure I could actually put this system right in front of the south-facing wall, and it could perhaps keep my plants warm in the winter. Of course, I'm in California, so the opposite might be true in summer. I don't know. And then your question was about what does the system look like? So if you just go to the website, projectspringtime.org, there is plenty of pictures and instructions on how it looks like. Any other questions? No questions? In which case, I'm going to have to just do the thing. Remember, I picked this tomato. Sorry, you're lost. No salt and pepper required. Okay, jealous and hungry. Okay, that is a great motivator. How costly is the filtration system? Haha. The correct answer, based on about 2 weeks of testing with these filters, is that the filtration system is pointless and useless. That seems to be the verdict so far. I mean, these little filters I bought some hardware store or something cost like $10 or something. but they don't seem to be filtering very much. So it doesn't seem to be actually necessary. It does happen that, so if there's lots of algae, there is a bunch of algae that end up in the reservoir, but the reservoir down there is dark, and it seems like they might actually be dying off. They don't seem to, not many seem to be making it up back the pipe. And so, actually, I should maybe point out one thing which I didn't. So this old system here, I don't know if you can see it up here at the end of the rising pipe up here. I have this very thin black pipe, and the reason why I have this there is because the pump here runs 24/7 because I don't have a controller. It's just pumped into the 120 volts outlet. And if I didn't have this very thin pipe up there, it would the pump would put way too much water through the system way too quickly. So I slowed it down mechanically, which is of course terrible from an energy efficiency perspective. And so in the new system, I have the timer, which is why I don't need to do that. But up here, that part right here, where it goes from the thicker pipe into the thinner pipe, sometimes gets clogged. So I need to sometimes clean that out. Which is why another thing I'm planning to do here is I bought this thing off Alibaba, or which is a little flow meter, which has a little propeller in there. And so the idea is that I would put this at the very end of my pipe before it goes back in the reservoir, and hopefully it will turn this propeller. I need to write some code to evaluate how fast it goes. But the idea is that if it gets clogged or there's some problem, it could alert me if there is no water going back to the reservoir, and that could be because it's clogged, for example, and I need to clean it out, or because something is broken and all the water gets pumped out of the system as opposed to around the system. Anything else? And I should mention, if you happen to be in the area, so this is Sunnyvale, California, feel free to reach out. The guy, Bruce, whose system I originally copied, lives in Palo Alto, and he has been very nice in giving people tours. I'm trying to pay it back, and if you want to see the system, reach out, and I can show you in person if you like. Or reach out to Bruce if you're in Palo Alto. He has contact info on his website, which you can find from the Project Springtime about page. So it seems to me that maybe we are about the end of this. We theoretically have 11 participants, but maybe they all walked away from their computers. If you have a comment, this is the time. Otherwise, I will end this call soon here. Okie dokie. I think that was it. Thank you, everybody. Happy hydroponicking, and enjoy your veggies.